This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Back in June, I received a text from Vinnie Cilurzo of Russian River asking if I was planning on being in the Yakima Valley for any part of hop harvest this year, because he had this idea for a podcast episode to celebrate the 25th birthday of Simcoe through a conversation with hop grower Jason Perrault of Perrault Farms. After a bit of back and forth, we figured out a time it could work mid-harvest and mid-selection, but it also felt like such an occasion might benefit from a little change of scenery. So rather than sitting at a table to record as we typically do, we hatched this crazy plan to record while we walked through an experimental hop field. This week's episode is that conversation between the three of us, recorded on a beautiful Sunday afternoon as the wind whipped through the hop vines. Joe Stang, our executive editor, was hanging out with us, but isn't on the mic, and he was there, taking some pictures and drinking some beers with us. The story of Simcoe might be familiar to some, but it's a hop that was almost stopped in its tracks. Fits and starts. It's a hop that's benefited greatly from the creative work that brewers have done with it. Throughout the episode, Vinnie and Jason tell that story from their perspectives, the shared stories of other major hop growers, and more. While Vinnie gets into details about how his inspirational Simcoe beer, Pliny the Elder, has changed over the years. Kind of an interesting perspective on that. Later on, we talk about the latest Russian River ode to the hop, Simcoe 25, and the way that they use Simcoe in just about every advanced hop format to achieve a saturated but layered Simcoe expression. We'll get into that conversation in a minute, but first, for years, G&T Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years because brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, and nor do they. They use quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. And with their 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need, and gain peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment? With Berkeley Yeast, it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Also, a day in the life of a brewer is packed enough as it is, so why not let Old Orchard assist with R&D? Custom blend development is available through their innovative R&D lab. Their bulk division supplies a wide range of beverage segments, making it the one-stop shop for flavoring beer and beyond. For more information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. Welcome back to the podcast, Vinnie.
Thanks, Jamie. It's an honor to be back on the podcast, and I loved your idea when you came back and said, what if we recorded it amongst the hop vines, and the three of us could be out here, and Joe is here as well.
Joe is back there, not on mic, but he is
no.
taking pictures for the gram.
And
Jason, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Excited about this.
It's, when it's great being here. I know I can speak for both of us that Simcoe is one of our favorite hops. Jason, helped breed it, and he drinks a lot of beer with Simcoe, and at that same time when I was communicating with you, Jamie, about possibly making a podcast, I was in the middle of starting to think about the Simcoe 25 recipe, and these Simcoe 25 t-shirts that we're all wearing, and some artwork for it, and it turned out Yakima Chief was also doing and Yakima Chief Ranches are also doing a celebration. But it really got me reminiscing about Simcoe, and not just because of how important of a hop it was and still is for Natalie and I and Russian River Brewery. I mean, it's the main hop we use. It's the main hop in Pliny the Elder. It's definitely what we buy the most of. But I think more important is, as I thought about this and was reminiscing, was just how important and critical it was for the original 3 family farms, the Carpenters, the Smiths by way of Loftus and now Tributary, and of course Perrault, where we are today, but we were talking a little bit before we went on air, but I just think it's extraordinary how this was a hop that almost never was, that Simcoe almost, didn't make it. It almost didn't exist. And if you extrapolate that out, then you don't have Mosaic either. But through just sheer persistence and fortitude and resilience and probably a lot of stubbornness, definitely, from Tom Carpenter in particular, these three multi-generation family farms kind of push through. So hopefully we can, talk more about a lot of that stuff and unlock some of these things, and maybe a few things will come up that Jason and I haven't really talked about over the years, because we have done stuff on Simcoe before, but the idea was to kind of really, get it on recording with you.
For sure. Well, with that said, this is a different kind of episode. This is a happy birthday, Simcoe. Where does the Simcoe story start?
How about Chuck Zimmerman? That's a name that probably most people don't know unless you are deep in the hop world. So Jason can take that on.
Yeah, it really starts with Chuck. We talked about Tom and Mike and my dad, and that was the originations of Yakima Chief Ranches, and they really had a vision of connecting their family farms directly with brewers. And doing business a little bit differently than the traditional model. And Chuck actually was a gentleman that had played many different roles in the industry at the time, and one of those was as a hop breeder. So he was helping them get rolling and learning how to not just grow but process and store hops, and get them to market properly. And he was running a breeding program. Basically out of his house, and he just started this up and had this material there, and he wanted to move it, and he was working with us, and he was partnered with us on what would eventually become Yakima Chief. And he said, hey, can we move this onto your property and really put some focus on this effort. And so we brought it here just a couple miles from where we're at right now. In fact, if the hops hadn't already been picked, I would have suggested we meet right out there. But it was out in what we call Field 8. So anyways, I guess backing up a little bit to Chuck himself.
Yeah.
Chuck was, he actually started out in hop research down in Oregon, and then moved his way up here to Washington State. So he was USDA, OSU down in Oregon State, and then came up here and worked out of the Prosser Research Center for a number of years. And he was involved in, if you were to look up the release of, Centennial, Chinook, Cascade even, he was involved in one way, shape, or form, and he helped commercialize Cascade. He was the first one that brought it up here, introduced it to growers like John Siegel Sr., like Tom Carpenter, like my grandfather. He brought this hop up there to Lester Roy. He brought this hop up here to growers in Washington, and really got it established to the point where the major brewers would accept it. So you could actually, the success of Cascade, you could really attribute a lot of that to Chuck's efforts in getting that commercialized. But he was directly involved in the breeding of Centennial, Chinook, Comet, Crystal. You can go down this long list, and eventually CTZ at the end. And then, of course, our varieties, Simcoe, Warrior, Palisade, and Autanum. But anyways, breeding was really, even though he had gone off and started working on the other aspects of the hop business, breeding was still, I think, a real passion for him. He understood the potential impact that it had in terms of genetics, being able to provide value across the supply chain. Mm-hmm. And so that's what really kicked off our breeding program. This would have been right around 1990 that we brought the plots out here. Might have that exact year wrong, but it was right around then. And I was about, 17 years old or so. And my dad asked me to help Chuck out and get that plot started. And that plot, like I said, was a couple miles from here. And those seedlings that he brought over became our first kind of single hill. And so that's where we had, our row 2, hill 56.
What we're drinking right now.
Yeah, it was the designation out in the field. But that's where those original plants resided, and that's where we selected those original plants. So anyways, that was all Chuck's material that he brought in.
What was the thought in those days? Because in 1990, it wasn't as if, this idea of enormous new aroma hops was the highest priority for hop growers.
No, I think back then it was definitely about alpha. Alpha was driving what we were doing. At the time in the industry, Anheuser-Busch was the major aroma hop user for U.S. aroma hops. And that was all grower direct, and that was, for us, it was a real bright spot. But where the competition really was, and where the opportunity really was in the alpha space. And so we were looking at the time to breed higher alpha varieties, higher by percentage and by yield per acre, to be more competitive and to give us that competitive edge. And that was Chuck was driving that home, that is how you are going to get ahead, is through genetics. And so that's, Simcoe was born from that rather than your typical aroma hop breeding. So
and that's what I think a lot of brewers, especially the newer generation of brewers, let's say 2010 or 15 on to present, probably don't know that Simcoe was originally bred to be a bittering hop.
Yeah. It has to be understood that was a much different market. That was a different time. A much different time. In terms of our craft beers, we know it didn't exist. I mean, craft beer existed, but it was really small. I mean, about the only craft brewers we ever saw wandering around the valley back then would have been,
Sierra Nevada,
probably. Ken would probably be about one of the very few that would be wandering around looking for hops, and he'd just be looking for what was left over after the big guys. But the fact of the matter was, the market was all about these large, either multinational or regional breweries that were really just after alpha. And so that's really, as growers, we were trying to compete on that, and that was a tough market to compete in, but that's what it was about. So that's why we went down that path.
So then, tell me about the development of Simcoe from there. It must have been a promising alpha hop, and you weren't concerned about other things, but where did it go from that point?
Yeah.
And what year did Chuck first cross it? Do you remember?
So the cross would have been made probably about 88, 89, and then it would be in 1990 that it ended up here.
So I just graduated high school in 1988 when Simcoe was crossed.
So we've joked about this.
I was
before,
just entering high school that year. I was
joking about that video. I'll have to show it to you. This video of me out there, I was about 17 years old, so I was getting ready to graduate, and acid wash jean jacket and a long mullet with my hair feathered back in the glory years. All right. But anyways, that was, it would have been about 1988, 89 that the cross was made. And then it was, it went through our, similar to the 10-year vetting process that we have now. So the 90s was spent kind of vetting these varieties. And it would have been about 1997, 98 that we put it into more of what we'd consider elite trials. That was also the time I was graduating college and coming back and taking on the breeding program full time. And so we were getting into elite trials then, and then decided to commercialize in 2000.
And that's when it would have become YCR.
So it would have become YCR
14?
14 right around 97, 98. I was actually, those numbers were the designations I started giving after I took over the program. So I took over the program from Chuck in 97, or started the process of taking it over, I guess I should say. And part of that, my initial job was getting in there, organizing the data, organizing our nomenclature and how we name things. And so I started assigning these accession numbers, and I wanted to do it a little bit different than everyone else. So I just did the YCR, started at number 1 and went through.
One was a tannum? No?
Number 1 was a tannum, yeah.
5 was Warrior. And Palisade was somewhere in there. I remember all these.
4, yeah. Palisade was YCR number 4.
And Chuck unfortunately never saw Simcoe cross the finish line, did he? He saw it cross the finish line in terms of being released. He did.
As a new variety. So yeah, he did. He got to be involved in that, and but he never got to see it succeed.
because it was still a struggle in those
it was
early
very
years.
much a struggle because back to your question about where it was where did it play in the market. So we were pretty direct. So as a young company, we were very targeted, and like I said, there was just a handful of customers. It's not like you had thousands of customers out there that you were trying to court these varieties with. So we were very targeted in our approach. And so you had Anheuser-Busch, you had Miller, and at the time we had Heineken. I mean, these were the ones that would have been our major focuses at the time. And Anheuser-Busch really wanted, like I said, it's all point in time stuff. So they were really bought in on the research of low cohumulone imparted a less harsh bitterness, a smoother bitterness. And so they were outward in their expression that they wanted a low cohumulone, high alpha hop. And so they were looking at a variety at the time out of the public program called Horizon, which was higher alpha but lower. You remember that one?
With it, yeah.
Yeah, really low yield though, really tough one to grow. And then Miller at the time was interested in more of the Galena types, the higher cohumulone, the higher beta, and it was more of a processing play. And so it was like you had opposite ends of the spectrum. And then you had the more generic, just clean alpha camp, and that would have been where Warrior went in. Warrior was more of it's supposed to be like a nugget type. But that was, Simcoe was very specific, directed in that kind of Anheuser-Busch camp in terms of we wanted a high alpha with low cohumulone. It was meant to be clean bittering, very smooth bitterness, nothing harsh. And unfortunately, for it at the time, the aromatics were just so big that not in a negative necessarily way in terms of the overall quality, but they were just big. And
what was the alpha of Simcoe at the beginning, and did it meet the requirements at the time?
Yeah, it was about 14 to, well, we'd see between 14 and 16% in the plots, and that was that worked, because you're comparing not just to CTZ at the time, because CTZ was the big kind of alpha hop at the time just for generic alpha production. But we were also comparing to like your nuggets and your Galenas. So, you were really looking at that 12 to, if you were hitting above that 12 to 14 range, you were sitting pretty good. And so that's where we saw Simcoe as a potential success. And the yield we were looking at that time would have been around 12 bales per acre as an average. And so that's about where we thought it would land, and we thought it was a winner in that sense.
What form were these large brewers using these hops in? They using pellets? Were they using extracts of some sort even then?
I think it varied, but I think at the time Anheuser-Busch would have been using, whole cone primarily. And then for Miller, it was definitely a processing hop. They wanted the hop to be, so it would have probably been pelletized for them, and then they would have processed it further from there.
And then how about when you decided, well, this isn't going to work as a bittering hop, it's too aromatic? Well, is there a clear-cut line, or do you just start?
Well, kind of. I mean, you could look at the acreage data tells a story, right?
Yeah.
It's funny how acreage data tells a story so much, when you look back at acreage. But the really, I think we released in 2000 with high hopes that this, would take off. It's kind of a chicken or egg type of deal. We didn't have, that confirmed, yes, this is an AB hop, we're going with it, it's going to take off. But at the same time, you almost had to have a name on it, put some acres in the ground, get some, critical mass behind it before a brewery would even consider, accepting it. And getting acceptance at a major brewery of any hop at that time, or even now, is really challenging.
And the risk must have been tremendous, because I know none of the farms were in great shape.
No, it's really funny if you look. That's a whole nother story. If you look back at that time, you think the amount of money we were investing in breeding, you think, why? why were we? Because we did not see a return on that for a long time.
Yeah.
So the risk was there, but at the same time, I think we were just so already far into it that we were just like,
you couldn't turn back.
No, I couldn't turn back at that point, and then they made the mistake of allowing me to come on full time, and I think I was just, that's all I wanted to do, and so and by that I just mean that, I wanted to get really aggressive with it and really make something of it. It wasn't just a side project and just a hobby. And so, we basically got to the point where we're like, we got to make this work one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so
We'll be back with more of the conversation in a second, but first, Indie Hops brings Oregon's natural wonders to brewers, celebrating 16 years of delivering compelling new hop varieties along with classics that thrive in Oregon's terroir. Indie is the original source for Strata, Luminosa, Lorien, Meridian, and their newest variety, Audacia. Release your creativity with the magic of pure, uncut Oregon hops from Indie. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And Extra Tough has been making rugged and reliable boots for 75 years. Built for the harshest conditions, the Legacy Collection styles are oil, acid, and chemical resistant with a non-slip rated outsole. Be prepared for whatever comes your way and shop the latest Extra Tough boots on extratough.com. That's XTRATUF.com. Also, brewers, have you ever considered brewing with North America's only ancient grain, wild rice? Craft brewers in northern Minnesota have been keeping this a secret for years. Joe at Canoe Wild Rice has a stockpile of this unique roasted grain ready to ship to you. From the waters of Minnesota to your taproom anywhere in the country, you're sure to create an in-demand product. Brewers Blend Wild Rice is the perfect size and texture so it can be added directly into your mash, saving you time in the brewing process. Plus, for over 4 generations, Canoe Wild Rice has been using their time-tested process that gives the wild rice a distinct roasted flavor. Who knows what sensation you could create with this aquatic grain? Canoe Wild Rice also has food-grade hulls available for your mash. Harvest season is underway in Minnesota now, but Joe will make time for you if you have any questions or want to get an order going. Send Canoe Wild Rice an email at joe@canoewildrice.com or give the office a call at 1-800-626-3809.
Yeah.
Well, before we talk about acreage, maybe I should tell the story about Gerard. And
Absolutely.
I think did you bring some acre numbers and acreage numbers?
I have some. I have some. Yeah.
If you want to grab those, and I'll tell the story of Gerard Lemons, which is how Jason and I met. Gerard was the first salesperson for Yakima Chief, and this is in the early days of Russian River when we were out at Corbel at the winery. And I had worked with Gerard previously when he was at an English hop company, Morris Hanbury. So we had already had this relationship. And Gerard comes to me with some experimental hops in 98, I think it was. And so I tested several hops for him, but the one that stood out was YCR 014, and that is eventually what became Simcoe. And I still remember the very first fermentation with that hop, and we make this beer called Hop To It. It's our single hop beer. And I remember my friend Arnie Johnson, who was the head brewer, brewmaster at Marin Brewery for few decades in Northern California, not far from us. And he happened to be in visiting me at Corbel, and he asked if there's anything we should sample. And I pulled a sample from the fermenter pre-dry hop of the Simcoe beer, the 100% Simcoe beer. And he was just blown away at the aroma even before it was dry hopped. And, thinking back, I know that was a time and place, and compared to where we're at now with how we make beer and hop beer, it's a little bit different, and you probably can't compare it to present day, but at the time it was really extraordinary. I had never seen a beer with that kind of aroma before it had been dry hopped. And keep in mind, even with dry hopping, we're talking maybe a pound or a pound and a half, at tops 2 pound per barrel, probably not even 2 pound per barrel. I have to go back and look. And so that was really the thing about Simcoe. And, when you talk about Simcoe is really that first hop that helped start the IPA revolution of all the modern hops, you do have to throw in Amarillo as well, because Amarillo came out at about the same time, but it came about in a different fashion with the way that Darren ran with Amarillo, whereas Simcoe was very strategically bred by Jason. Anyways, Gerard would bring me these experimental hops, and he said, all I ask is that you bottle some. So I would hand bottle some and give them back to him, and he would just bring them back up to the hop breeder. The time that I know, he was referencing Jason Perrault. And so Jason could tell the story that Gerard was telling him about a young brewer in Northern California that was brewing with these beers. And so we knew each other, but we didn't know each other directly. And I still credit Gerard with a lot of what I know about hops in the early years, and some of the things that people talk about hops now and how maybe you need to let the myrcene flash off. He was advocating for that stuff back then, but most people were in the industry, in the microbrewery industry, were looking at him saying, you're crazy. Why would you want to leave a bag of hops open to let the myrcene flash off, or whatever it was that he was advocating for? But he was really a bright person, very charismatic, and Natalie and I always enjoyed spending time with he and his wife when they would come to town. And anyways, that became our exchange of beer and hops.
Yeah, I think that some of the best hop conversations I've had has been when Gerard used to have to step out for a cigarette break at meetings, because we'd go step outside and have a beer and sit there while he smoked. And yeah, just a wealth of knowledge, really interesting character. But yeah, he would, what Vinnie was saying, he'd send these bottles up, and he'd give them to my father-in-law, who was the CEO at the time of Yakima Chief. And John would bring them home to his house, and I'd go over to John's house and drink these beers. And John would say, hey, we got some of those experimental beer. This is a new thing. This is not something, it was not common for brewers to send beer to us for much of anything at the time. So to get these beers was a really cool, unique experience. And I just recall, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I just remember the number being written on the crown. And
that's all it was.
Yeah. And I just, you have this blank bottle with the number written on the crown, and crack that open. And like Vinnie said, you try these beers, and it's an eye opener when something like Simcoe comes across, because all of a sudden, boom, you're like, wow, because we'd send all these hops, and most of them, I think, if you were to use them today, would be, they'd be all right, but they wouldn't be huge impact, right? And so, but Simcoe stood out even back then. But so I still remember that crown with the 14 on it.
It's something we talk about a bunch, that you can't pull the beer style in American craft beer apart from the agriculture that drives that. Without a hop like Citra, you probably don't have hazy IPA. It doesn't become a thing. Without something like Simcoe, at the time that it did arrive and became this thing that brewers could use, West Coast IPA, American IPA wouldn't necessarily have developed like that. I know it's hard for us to think back that, but I mean, the 90s, only toward the tail end of the 90s did IPA even become a popular craft beer style. And then even in the 2000s, it was still not one of the most popular craft beer styles, but it very quickly became that popular beer style over the 2000s. How did that interaction with agriculture impact the way that you thought about IPA, Vinnie, and the way other California brewers were brewing the entire style?
Yeah, it was an early time, like you said. So, the ag part of it, I think I was a little different than a lot of brewers, because at the time, no one was contracting unless you were of Sierra Nevada size or bigger, or very few were. You'd just pick up the phone and call your hop company. At the time, for me, it was Hop Union and Yakima Chief. I think for me, I had a little different of a viewpoint, because I come from the wine industry. So I have this connection with grapes to wine. And so I never thought of it that way. These experimental hops, though, were an eye-opener for me. But I had seen experimental hops as a home brewer back in the late 80s with CFJ 90, which became Centennial, and then another one, CFJ 4. that went away. And Chuck was involved with both of those, ironically, but not on a professional level, that I could get these hops that, I think the ag connection to it now is that the brewer of today has always known, for the most part, Citra, Mosaic, Amarillo, Citrus, Abro, go on and on and on, and all the other companies that have breeding programs. And back then, it was just, for the most part, the basic public varieties, what we would call probably pretty pedestrian aromatic hops.
Sure.
Cascade, yes, Centennial is still very big, but you put Centennial next to Citra, and Citra is going to blow it away every time. And that's all I knew. So to be on a professional level and have a hop like Simcoe, when it did become officially named in 2000, and that's when we created Pliny the Elder as well, was around this hop. And, I think for me, when I think back, and I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, reminiscing, it's kind of a pinch me moment for myself, and very humbling that I look back and say, I've been using this hop since before it was even a professional, a commercial hop. It was experimental. And, through this hop, beyond all the agriculture and the brewing, I think it's the friendships that have developed. And, Natalie and I are very close with the Carpenters, the Perraults, the Smiths. They're some of our best friends in the industry. And I really think that, for me personally, is why it makes this story so special for Natalie and I. And that this hop is still going. It's 25 years. I mean, the agriculture part of it is that it was planted in 2000, and at least just talking about Mike's numbers at Loftus, at the Smiths, they planted 12 acres. They got 6 bales per acre. 2001, they still had 12 acres, got it up to 8 bales per acre. But by 2002, they still had the 12 acres, but they didn't string any of it. They idled all 12 acres because there was too much inventory sitting around.
We spent about 2 years building up inventory. Couldn't hardly give a pound away. Like I said, we had high hopes, and you had to create that critical mass for, those larger brewer customers to say, yeah, we're willing to commit to it.
But that was also a really tough time for the entire world of craft beer in the United States. 2001 to 2004 was the last time we saw a net decline in the number of operating breweries up until this past year. And, and so there were some problems, just some issues with quality, some other kind of cultural things that were affecting that first craft beer boom of the late 90s, and a real tough time to bring something new aimed at craft brewers right at that time.
That was tough for the farms too.
Oh, absolutely. That was a really difficult time for the farms. We can, there's a multitude of reasons as why that was, but it was just a challenging period of time, hands down. And so, we were looking for some level of success, but we couldn't. We also had to draw the line somewhere. And that's where we started, the drawback. You get these acres in the ground, you get a couple of years worth of inventory, you can only take so much. So Loftus idled theirs. I think we dropped ours down to 5. So there was 5 remaining acres, because I don't think Carpenters had any in the ground at the time.
And Loftus, Mike told me in 2003, they had 8.7 acres. They went from 12 to 8.7. Yep. You had your 5.
Yep.
That's the crazy part of the story, is that it was the hop that almost never was, like I said before.
We were about ready to pull the plug.
Yeah. And Mike went on to tell me that as it started to pick up some ground, he said Simcoe changed our lives. It is really what got our kids back to the farm. I remember at the very first, I had a little time today before I got to Perrault, so I popped into the Hop Museum in Toppenish, and I hadn't been since 2004 when I was there with the very first Hop and Brew School. And Ralph Woodall put this nice frame picture together and sent some of us early attendees that, and it was up at the museum, and it was 2004 with a picture. But I remember Ralph Olson of Hop Union giving a talk at that first Hop and Brew School, saying that the kids, there's no one to take these farms over. It was a very depressing talk and presentation. And I mean, Jason had intended to come back, but most of the farm's kids weren't back. So when Mike says that it's really what brought the kids back, and that the fact that it really turned the farms around, but at the time it was a terrible business model, what they were doing, and their farms were almost close to collapsing, and then somehow Simcoe got some.
Yeah, what was it that turned things around?
Well, it was the combination of Simcoe. Well, it was brewers like Vinnie using Simcoe in an incredible beer, and then that catching fire, really, because that really is what started. You look back at the acreage. We were talking about those acres that, and going back in that 2003, 4, 5. I mean, it was as late as 2008. There was 129 acres. That means, and there was only 3 growers growing it. So that means that between Perrault, Carpenters, and Smiths, there was only about a 40-acre block per family growing it until about 2008. Then 2009, it started to bump up. 2011, I remember sitting in a meeting with the three of us, the 3 families were all together, and we were talking about Simcoe specifically because it was growing. We were pretty optimistic, and we needed these opportunities. I could tell a whole nother story along the lines of what Mike was talking about in terms of where our family farm was out and almost going out of business in 2006, and needing that extra push from something like Simcoe being even as small as it was, just to help us keep our heads above water. That's another story. But the 2011, we were sitting in a meeting room talking about Simcoe and where we're going to go with it. And I remember Tom Carpenter. I can still hear his voice. By God, we're going to keep this variety to the 3 farms because we've put the blood, sweat, and tears into this. We're going to make this work. And it's something that can help these 3 farms out, and we deserve it. He wasn't wrong, but by 2012, I had to come back and call the group back together and say, guys, we're not going to be able to do this, just the 3 farms. And so it was, I think by 2012, we had over 1,000 acres in the ground.
And Mike told me that there was 1.5 million pounds of Simcoe harvested by 2012.
Yeah.
So it went from nothing in 2002 when the acreage was idled, to a decade later that it was 1.5 million pounds, give or take.
So you go back to Mike's comments about that bringing the kids. That's no joke. I mean, and you look at the level of investment that was made on our family farm. So our family farm went from having the bank calling the note in 2006 and our farm going up for auction on the county courthouse steps. This is a hard story to tell because it is emotional, but and then my dad pushing back enough to where he got financing and saved the farm, to then evolving to where we have the level of investment we made over here. That's driven not just by Simcoe, but it's driven by craft beer, our level of investment in that, and our commitment to Simcoe and bringing
this
that forward.
Foundation of Simcoe, which has then grown into other new hubs.
That drove that
right
for our family farm. And so you could look at those facilities and say that those facilities were built by Simcoe, and I have no problem saying that.
We'll be back with more in a second, but first, for over 50 years, Prairie Malt has been producing high extract malts forged from the fertile soils of Saskatchewan. As proud members of Bort Malt, one of the largest malt companies in the world, with 27 malt plants in 16 countries, their North American malts are complemented by a wide variety of base and specialty imported malts from around the globe. This year, Prairie Malt is partnering with Roadhouse Brewing Company and Melvin Brewing Company to pour an unforgettable lineup of beers at their shared booth at this year's Great American Beer Festival in Denver, October 9th through 11th. So stop by the booth, sample some award-winning beers produced with excellent malts, and learn more about why malt from bigger is better at prairiemalt.com. And Breese Malting has been involved in the craft brewing community ever since it was established in the 1980s. Today, Breese offers the largest product line of specialty malt and is continuing to innovate. New malts include Heritage Gold, an English-style ale malt with complex bread character, and Lighthouse Munich, which has the full body of a Munich malt but minimal impact on color. All Briess malts are produced in the U.S., so you can count on a reliable supply chain. Barley is sourced from 300 growers in the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming and Montana. Malt is the backbone of beer. Check out why so many craft brewers trust Briess for their specialty malts at brewingwithbriess.com.
And if you've not been to the Perrault Farms, it is the Taj Mahal of picking facilities.
It is quite something.
It is quite a facility, and
you can note them by their signature color if you see photos of harvesters. And
years ago, we have a family meal with the Perraults every year during hop selection. Natalie and I do, and there's a great picture of Natalie and I shaking hands. It would have been about probably 2014. And what year did you guys finish the first expansion?
The first expansion was 2012.
It was 2012, so it was a couple years after that. Natalie and I are just starting to think about building our dream brewery in Windsor, which we did in 2017, 2018. And Steve said very famously, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't leave my kids some debt. And what he was referring to was that beautiful picking facility that they were so, and still are, proud of. And Natalie and I joke that it's Steve Perrault's fault for us going into multiple millions of dollars of debt, but those are some very fond memories. And if you go out to, Loftus has had a really great facility and now tributary for years. The Carpenters reinvested and now have an absolutely phenomenal facility. And I've watched the quality of the Carpenter Simcoe increase every year to the point where, it is some of the best out there. And for those brewers that are listening, if you have never rubbed Carpenter Simcoe, it's fantastic. And speaking of, I emailed Brad and wanted to get a little insight on Simcoe from him. So he sent me an email. I just wanted to read some of the stuff that he said. He said, Simcoe, more than just a hop, but she really is one of the symbolic icons of the history of flavor-forward beer. That, quote, what do we do with this, end quote, hop that just about was plowed out of existence. When I look at Simcoe, I see a young Jason Perrault wearing a mighty mullet of the time of the tutelage of Chuck Zimmerman in a seedling nursery, observing and soaking in the craft of hop breeding. I also recall a Yakima Chief Ranch's meeting at the quote-unquote headquarters down at the Zimmerman barn near Granger with Steve and Jason Perrault, Mike Smith, and Craig Carpenter. This was after Steve Carpenter had left the farm to run Yakima Chief, and the craft market was on the rise. He went on to say that at the time, thanks to Jason, I was learning more about how special and unique and varied Simcoe is and the expression of aromas that Simcoe is giving. He goes on, talks about some of the numbers and whatnot, and just finishes with that on the Carpenter family farm, the next generation is still very excited to grow Simcoe. Of all the hops on our farm, Simcoe has the most varied aroma conversion as she matures on the vine. Great and continued relationships have been established over Simcoe, all stemming from a paired heart towards flavor. Every year, it is truly rewarding, meeting new friends, seeing old as Simcoe shines. And he finished it with, as a man once said, quote, just keep it rolling. And if you don't know who that is from, that is a quote that Tom Carpenter would routinely say. And you might even see some shirts and whatnot floating around the valley that have that on the shirt that honors Tom Carpenter, who passed away just a year or two back. So but Tom was really the backbone and the architect of Yakima Chief.
Brad hit the nail on the head there. That was good. They several times I've heard the word relationships brought up, and I think that might have been probably the number one lesson we've learned from Simcoe, or that number one value that we've gained from all this is just trying to struggle through the early years and making things work, and Simcoe being the vehicle to help us do that. it took the relationships to make that happen. It took relationships with Vinnie and others to make that happen. And what that taught us along the way is the value of those relationships and just how important that is in terms of developing not just, the short-term value and that's what the market was kind of used to at the time, but really that long-term value of how we can build the businesses up, not just for when things are going great, but when things get challenging, like we're all facing right now. How do we maintain that value? And it's all about the relationships. And so Simcoe's been critical in that.
So there's that business side, of the relationship idea, which is incredibly important. But there's also the creative side of that, where working together, partnering with brewers helps you as a grower dial that hop in and produce and change that, to get it to what brewers absolutely want it to be. And of course, hops are agricultural products. They change over time. They change season to season. Let's talk a little bit about how Simcoe has moved, developed, grown, morphed, how the way that you grow it, the way that you harvest it may have developed over time. And then, maybe Vinnie, you can talk about how what you have seen over 25 years of using Simcoe and the eras, or if eras existed for Simcoe, and how that has gone through it.
Yeah, Jason, you want to start on the growing and that part of it and harvesting?
Yeah, I think Simcoe, as I mentioned, started out at just with the 3 growers, and we kind of settled in it's just a nice early-ish hop for us. We start picking at the end of August, but nice thing is it's a very, what I categorize as forgiving hop, where you have a long harvest window. And so it's just really settled in a place where it fits our picking windows really well. And so it's kind of settled into this real high value spot for us.
Why is that high value?
Just because we don't really have anything else in that window. That picking window. The closest thing you'd have is maybe Centennial, but we're certainly not going to fill our farms with that. And
you as a farm need to slot in things that are going to be valuable week by week.
Yeah, every variety has a specific window, and so we've got these discrete windows within throughout harvest, and to maximize our facilities, we want to make sure we get the right. We have all those windows filled. So,
it is an immense capital investment in all of the picking equipment, and so getting the most harvest out of this equipment, the most use is a key to business efficiency.
Yep. And so I think that, as far as the evolution of Simcoe, I don't know that it's changed a lot over the years. Originally when we released it, when Chuck and I were first working on it and made the decision to say, yeah, this is the hop, this is a good hop, we're moving forward, we pegged it at about 12 bales per acre. And it didn't perform to that right out the gate, I don't think. Looking back, we'd see 12 bales.
What does 12 bales per acre mean?
2,400 pounds per acre.
Yeah.
Which is decent yield.
Yeah.
And
for Washington.
Yeah.
It's a great yield if you're not in Washington.
Yeah. So, we, it never did hit that, but early on, other than, like spotty here and there in exceptional cases, but we knew it was genetically there, the potential was there. But that happens anytime you release a new variety. Once you get it from small plots and go to larger plots, the yield always declines and then kind of settles at where it's going to be. And it settled in for a number of years at like 8 to 9 bales, which from an aroma hop standpoint, it's pretty damn good. I mean, you look at what the traditional aroma hops yielded. That was still pretty good. Plus, it was fitting into a good picking window. So, as far as its evolution, it's been one of those varieties. It's actually stayed pretty stable over time in terms of its value add to our operation. Where we've seen a really change in the evolution now is with our propagation of virus-free material, or so-called virus-free material, where we're kind of resetting these plants through meristems, and all of a sudden now we're seeing the yield bump up as much as 40%. So now we're getting Simcoe yards that are hitting that, close to that 2,400 pounds per acre. So now we're looking at on the reset yards, yields of 10 to 12 bales per acre. So it's almost like Simcoe's finding a new life, which is another, I think, an important point to make, that 25 years seems like a long time, but in the life of hop varieties, if you look around the grand scheme of things, 25 years is still young. It's just getting started. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Vinnie,
Well,
from your
and
perspective,
I just want to add one other thing, that from a brewer's standpoint, one of the tough propositions is that obviously brewers want hops at the lowest price. Growers they need to make a profit, and there's got to be some middle ground here. But if the farms can get more, bales, pounds per acre, that means there's less financial input on the farm, because they're still only working off of X number of acres, but getting more. And so this whole virus-free program, and that's a lot of what, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but Yakima Chief Ranches down in Zillow works on and trying to build a program for all of the grower owners of YCH. So.
we have a great episode that we did on virus-free hops, of what they mean, and
I think Ryan was on that episode with Megan. Yeah.
But from how do any sensory difference between these virus-free hops on the new plots and the older Simcoe?
Yeah, I mean, we were up a week ago doing our Simcoe selection, and there were plenty of virus-free mixed in, and for me, they smell every bit as good. They have the yield potential that's there. So no changes. But I think when I reflect back, Simcoe for me was the first hop that I really learned that a hop, based on when you select it within its, let's call it a 10-day picking window, has different attributes. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Natalie and I are most grateful for is probably well over a decade ago, Mike and Pat Smith getting out a sample of Simcoe from every one of their fields. And this was before Mike's kids opened Bale Breaker. They had their little home brewery behind the offices there at Loftus. In fact, those years, Natalie and I would stay up in the upstairs in the old house, which was their offices during selection. You'd hear the truck rumble by with all the green material to go to the compost pile every 40 minutes. But it smelled amazing, so how could you not like it? We would sample through these, let's call it 20 fields, and you'd see it from, August, the end of August to September 9th or 10th, whatever it was, and really see that evolution. And I'd never thought about hops like that before, and Simcoe was the hop that taught me that. And so early Simcoe is very grapefruit driven, middle Simcoe harvest in that, call it 10-day picking window, is more pine driven, and then the end gets more pungent and a little more dank, and so there's a little bit of everything. And now we know all hops have that to some degree.
Sure.
But this was the hop for me that really taught me that, and it was in 2011 that we started making Row 2 Hill 56 our mostly all Simcoe beer, our Simcoe Focus beer. There's a little Mosaic in it, but I think that's legal since Mosaic is Simcoe's daughter. And vice versa, you make a Mosaic beer, it's okay to put some Simcoe in because they're related, of course. So.
One of the beautiful things about Simcoe, right, though, is that window. You can be on the front end and have a beautiful hop. You can have the tail end, still have a beautiful hop. It just depends on your personal preference. Yeah. That's why I said, it's a forgiving hop earlier. A lot of hops are not. You get some hops that once they go towards that tail end, at least for me anyways, it's OG, it's done.
I believe it's Cashmere that brewers will talk about, that it just has a very small window. Mm-hmm. And once you get outside of it, if you're ahead of it, it's green. If you're after it, it's just full OG or whatever else.
Yeah, you might have like a really discrete period where it's optimum. But Simcoe, it just evolves.
So we would do this year after year. We would always do it with Bell's, with John Mallett and his team. It was a really fun exercise, and then we would go to Mike and Cheryl's house and have a great meal. But it taught me exactly what we want. And now when Natalie and I do selection, we almost always pick Simcoe, and Jason can attest to this, usually from September 4th through 6th. So we're kind of late early, if you will, to middle and it's always a little bit of grapefruit with a good pine note. So when you drink Pliny the Elder and you get that big pine that Pliny is kind of its signature from a hop note, that's all Simcoe right there, and it's a very specific picking window, and it's uncanny that we select every year, almost always, not just to the picking window, but the same field. And Jason's dad, Steve, will always ask at dinner when we're here every year, saying, well, what field did you select? And he has his favorite field, so I think he's always proud when we do select his favorite
I
field.
do like to always make sure that field is on the table. just out in his honor, because I want to make sure that the opportunities are. But not to mention, it's just always nice. It always smells nice.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna interject. This is Joe. Everybody, sorry. And Jamie can take this out later if he wants to. But thinking about the timing of when Simcoe almost disappeared and when it started to make a comeback, I can't help but think of when Vinnie was sharing Pliny the Elder recipes at the National Homebrewers Conference in the mid-aughts. And I can't tell you how many brewers we've talked to over the years whose IPA recipe started with that.
yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Joe, because as I was, thinking about all of us being together here, and earlier, Jamie asked Jason something about like what changed. I do know that it's a little weird talking about this because it's my own beer, but I do know that publishing the Pliny recipe for homebrewers was in 2005. So you were right on the time, Joe. And it's that whole thing that I know Jamie believes in, and we believe in too, to just be very open and giving. And you can brew, brewers say it all the time on the podcast, you can brew same recipe multiple places. There's breweries that have made, some really fun projects out of this, and it's not going to be the same. So it never really worried me that someone would copy it. It's absolutely flattering and humbling that, the recipe has been, used as a foundation. We never meant it to be an exact, replica. I just assumed that folks would use it. I never thought, though, that it would go beyond homebrewing. In fact, one of these family dinners we had with the Smiths many years ago, Mike and I sat down and just kind of back of the napkin started writing out, as Simcoe grew, as so did Pliny. And it was really neat to see this, and it's something that Natalie and I are really proud of. We know these farms were struggling, and Simcoe was a part of, a small part of them getting to the next level. And I don't know. It's fun to think back to that. Obviously, Pliny has changed. We've tweaked the recipe, and things change because we've modernized it. But at the time, it is still fun to get people coming into the brewery with their Pliny the Elder clone brews. So,
it's a fascinating thing, but that by creating something and sharing it with the world, it not only impacts other brewers, it also impacts farmers to such a degree. It creates things that can drive entire markets and move things forward. And that is an incredible function of craft beer today. And just an amazing thing that by putting things out there, we can all create better things that become more compelling for consumers, that taste better, that smell better, and that capture people's attention, and spark their imagination. And that by feeding back into this, it continues to make craft beer compelling for people who drink beer. And that has such an effect, not just on breweries, but also back here to the very farms and the very existence of those farms.
I'd love to hear, kind of trailing off that, how did you, Jason, move to thinking that Simcoe, you being a cross to make what became, I believe it was HBC 369, which ultimately became Mosaic. Like, what was I know that crosses are just very random, but I know you're also thinking about it behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jamie, that was really well said. I think that, I was asked the other day, what not the other day. I was asked a while back what I felt was the most sustainable hop that we grow in terms of what's contributed to our sustainability. My answer was Simcoe, and I got a shock response because it's not the highest yielder. It's not that but it's because of everything you just talked about in terms of the value creation that's created, and the level of reinvestment, the relationships, just the change in everything we do. So anyways, appreciate your comments there. But to your question, Vinnie, is in terms of what drove us to start using it. So like the cross that resulted in Mosaic was in 2001. So it was before things really would have taken off with Simcoe. But it was still recognized that Simcoe, there was a lot of value there. We did love the aromatics. It wasn't like we ignored the aromatics. We knew there was something special there. It's just was too much for the target customer at the time. But we knew that the low cohumulin, the high alpha, and the potential for yield was there. We just wished it was higher. And so that's where that came from, was to use it as a parent and say, okay, can we replicate the alpha, maybe even bring it higher? Can we increase the yield, replicate the bittering components, and in terms of the cohumulin, and just have something that's improved? And didn't get it on the alpha side, but certainly yield wise, there was only one or two selections out of that entire family. I think there was several hundred in that family, and ended up selecting two. It was 369 and let's say 370. 369 kind of won out and became Mosaic.
Yeah.
But, and it was yield, but it was aroma, and that was before things were really taking off in IPA. But we homebrewed with it and I remember cracking open up a beer, and it just big time bubble gum and blueberry. Just be like, holy shit! Yeah. We feel like, is that for real? And is that even good? We don't even know. And so that was a real eye opener. But that was direct offshoot of Simcoe.
I remember being on the first hop quality group trip to Yakima, which I believe was 2010, and you presented us HBC 369, and we're in I believe we were in the conference room at Loftus, and Jason was there, and he presented it to us, and amongst other things, and just rubbing this thing, going, this is incredible. And you ended up sending me a bale, a 200-pound bale, and I would make a beer with it. And the blueberry notes were just insane. And that elusive blueberry note of Mosaic, us and many other brewers still look for. And every time I talk to Connor at Cellar Maker about Mosaic, at the time, I believe he was working at City Beer Store in San Francisco, rest in peace. And he still talks about that batch or two of beer that we made using Mosaic, and just that giant blueberry note that it had. So I think that's really cool that you have this this hop that was really a part of the foundation of the IPA revolution, and then it has a daughter that becomes even greater in stature and use and whatnot, and really great, both of them great hops.
Right, these are all they're evolutionary steps, but those evolutionary steps continue to exist, and the same thing can be said about the beer as well as the hop. The beer was also Pliny the Elder was an evolutionary step for craft beer, and then more generations have built on that evolutionary development, and then spawned their own evolutionary developments, and then things spread and spread and spread. And it's interesting to see how the life takes these things and develops them in different directions.
Absolutely.
So Vinnie, for you, the way that you use Simcoe in your beers, how has that changed over the years as you have honed these things? Because the way you make Pliny the Elder now is not exactly the way that you make Pliny the Elder in that recipe, even though so many people are still referencing back to that. It's a little bit different. And of course, now we're drinking a beer called Simcoe 25 that you brewed to connect back with Simcoe and celebrate it in this way. And so you're also thinking about Simcoe now in the scope of this beer in a different kind of context. How has Simcoe changed in the way that you use it in Pliny? And then how did you start thinking about it, using it in Simcoe 25?
For Pliny, it's been more than anything, just more of it. I guess I should back up and say that, like a lot of us that were brewing IPAs that I would call an American IPA that had a little bit of crystal malt in it, that was the thing, is we never went over 3% crystal malt. So I think it was C40. So it was still pretty light on the crystal malt even then. And over the years, we whittled it back to where it is now, where it's 2-row and, silo 2-row and some sugar. And so I think by doing that, it's increased the hop punch that Pliny has. Of course, we've increased the quantity of hops as well. And that really is just, based on consumer demand. And it's something that when I think back 20 years ago to say like how much hops we're adding now, it'd be like, I don't think the consumer could handle that. and yet it is. And, Pliny is, it's pretty readily available in Northern California, where we do most of our distribution, and California in general, because we have strong distribution in Southern California. But once you get out of the area, it's still pretty hard to get. And through that, we
can catch it from time to time in Colorado. We get a decent spot.
Yeah. So, but it's been all about the focus on trying to better flavor, aroma stability, but strictly relating to Simcoe, it's really just been finding the lots that we love, that Natalie and I hone in on and say, this is what Simcoe is. When we select, we don't make enough Row 2 Hill 56, our Simcoe Pale Ale, to have a specific lot for it. So it, by default gets Simcoe, Pliny Simcoe, if you will. We're not gonna select a Simcoe lot that's pungent, but we're not going to select one that's straight up grapefruit. We need that pine. That's Pliny's signature.
Right.
And, for Pliny, the through line is Simcoe with Amarillo behind it. And all the other hops have changed over the years. And there's, now it's got Tangier in it, a new hop from Seagull. And I love what it's become with that. And then looking forward to a beer like Simcoe 25, which originally was going to be, we're going to just brew it a few times in 2025 to celebrate the anniversary. I'm pretty sure we'll keep brewing it. Kind of like Joe at Pint House with Mosaic Takedown. He's going to keep brewing that beer. It was a one-off thing to start, but everyone likes it so much. And for Simcoe 20,
phenomenal beer, craft beer brewing beer of the year last year. Too.
I think I sent you a picture. The last can I had of a recent batch that Joe sent me, I did Simcoe 25 and Mosaic Takedown, and it was really remarkable. And I believe Natalie and I, we were doing this at home. We tasted it blind, and you could see the relationship between the hops, that they were related. They had some hop components and textural components to it that were similar, and that was really cool to do that tasting. But for Simcoe 25, I really wanted to honor what it is and what it is to us. So first off, and this is very subtle, but because it was originally bred to be a bittering hop, I wanted it to have a really firm bitterness. And it's got Simcoe all the way through. At the beginning of the boil, there's a 30-minute addition, a 15-minute.
Is this all one lot of Simcoe, or?
Well, we buy more Simcoe than what is a lot. So, for instance,
sure you do.
Our current cryo is a blend of a couple farms. I will say though that we only buy the 3 founding families.
Gotcha. Sure.
So if you look at the Row 2 bottle, they're on there on the fence post, the Carpenters, the Perraults, and then Loftus, which is the Smith family. And by default, Loftus is also tributary, which is what, Bill Pat runs both farms now. And that's kind of a personal thing for me, that I still think they they grow the absolute best Simcoe. There's some amazing Simcoe out there, but I love working with the 3 farms, and it's those relationships that we talked about. And it's a mix of, on the hot side, I wanted to also include as many formats as well. So Simcoe 25 has T90 pellets. It has cryo. It has good old-fashioned CO2 hop extract, but at the end of the boil. And when we brew it in Santa Rosa on our 20 barrel, we do use extract at the beginning just because it's a sheer quantity. But all the early batches of Simcoe 25 I brewed on our pilot brewery, and still am brewing a lot of it on the pilot brewery right now just because it's selling really well in the pubs. On the dry hop side, we're doing a Day Zero, so at Knockout, dry hop with Dino Boost. So using a variation of Kelsey's method where I will put the Dino Boost in a container with some hot water, mix it with a handheld blender, and then add it to the vessel instead of doing it Kelsey's method he adds the hot wort and adds it to the tank. That also has at Day Zero a dry hop of YCH 803, which is a kind of a derivative of Hyper Boost. And it's got some abstracts, Quantum Bright Simcoe, which is our selected. So that's the, let's call that dry hop
Yeah,
one.
them Quantum Bright, your selected Simcoe.
Yeah. We send them our Simcoe and they extract it into Quantum Bright. And then,
It's just got Simcoe in every possible form.
Yeah.
In every process format.
And then at post fermentation, we're dry hopping it with T90, cryo, and more abstracts, Simcoe. And that's where we're throwing in some Mosaic as well. And I like the Mosaic because it's adding a little dimension to it. And, the thing about
creates a little family drama.
It absolutely. Well, like I said, it's legal to put Mosaic in a Simcoe beer and vice versa. But the interesting thing with using that much advanced hop product in all these formats is that you're adding so much oil. And I believe I was texting you after you had the abstracts episode. And we typically have a rule at Russian River, and we broke it with Simcoe 25. But our rule is to not add, if you're looking at your dry hop bill and everything's been converted back to pellets, don't add more advanced hop products, so flowable hops, which I believe was the thing at the last brewery's retreat at the dinner. Who was it that kept saying flowable hops? And it became a thing anyways.
Yep.
And 20% is our number. And if you go beyond 20%, we see the foam drop pretty significantly. For Simcoe 25, never letting an opportunity to test something pass, we went all the way to 50%. It still has pretty good foam as I look at it now, but it's also got a really good charge of Tetra. And so for those brewers that are listening that are using advanced hop products, those oils that you're adding at dry hop can really knock your foam down, and Tetra can be the savior. So anywhere from 5 to 10 BUs. I'll also add that we've had some other beers beyond Simcoe 25 that were a little bit drier than this beer. I think Simcoe 25 is finished at 2.3 to 2.5, depending on the batch. We've had some other beers that finished drier that we did this Tetra trick that also had some advanced hop products in it. It became maybe a little too bitter. And so that's something we're still trying to learn and figure out. But in a conventional sense, 20% is a number we don't go past. But here we basically swapped out 50% of the hops with advanced hop products just to get more layers of flavor. And in some of the batches, we've used whole cone as well. But that's more something we more reserve for our big 75 barrel brew house. So anyways.
You sent us a 4-pack of Simcoe 25 at the office maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I remember when we opened it, Paul, our review coordinator, and I opened it up. And I don't think that I've ever had a beer that smelled as vivid of Simcoe as that. The aroma was just so intense and so focused. And it captured that in just such a beautiful kind of way. So I think at some point here, we're going to have an episode and talk about advanced hops products maybe we'll get the IPA gang together.
Back together.
In some form or fashion there.
Well, it's
it's
crazy because I know some brewers are so against those things, but for me, it's the advancement of a beer like Pliny that, and it's kind of taken it to the next level, and just like Mosaic is the next level of Simcoe as the relationship of breeding that Jason has done, and I really think that we use Simcoe 25 as an experimental beer, if you will, and we will learn something from this beer that I'm sure will carry through to other beers we make. And 50%, no, that's not something we'll probably do regularly. So that all the hop growers that are listening don't have to worry about that. You need not just cryo, you need T90. You need that green matter in there. And if you don't, it can be very thin and lifeless. And I've had some beers from some very, very extraordinary brewers who I have just such great respect for that use like all advanced hop products in some way, shape, or form, even with some concentrated pellets. And it just was missing something. So T90 is such a critical part of all of these dry hop beers. And I'm sure a year from now, 5 years from now, we may be in a different spot and we can learn something more. But for now, that for me is where I'm at.
The wind is whipping around us here in the field. We've been talking for a while now. Probably should take a big picture look at this. Jason, from your perspective, first, does Simcoe have any other children out there that haven't been entirely claimed? Legitimate, illegitimate, it doesn't really matter.
Nothing legitimately at this point. That's not to say that won't change. I mean, we continue to look to Simcoe as a viable parent and source of material, and so. But I still think, like I said, I still think Simcoe itself is just really getting a start. We talk about advanced products and it's advanced chemistry that we're doing on these hops now. Simcoe still plays a key role in all that. So I don't know. I think from that standpoint, Simcoe will continue to add value from whether it be from a genetic standpoint or from a product creation standpoint. But I think it'll stand on its own here for the next few years.
And the value of, to a large degree, keeping farms operating, bringing kids back to the farm, getting new generations of these farming families, giving them some hope that there is going to be a business in the future and that there is more to this, and that it can also be cool and be a fun thing to be a part of is just one of the legacies of that contribution.
I like to think that's what Simcoe kind of represents to us, in terms of its contribution. You look at what it's contributed to our family farm, the Smiths, the Perraults, but not just them. I mean, we talk about those three farms that in terms of the expansion of those acreage as craft grew. I mentioned that in 2011 that was just 3 farms growing it, and by the next year we were like, okay, this isn't going to work. We went from 3 farms to I think 8 farms the next year, and then by the mid like 2015 2016 there was close to 50 growers growing Simcoe. And so you look at the value that brought back to all those farms over that period of time and what that represents. Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. So you look at the challenging time we faced over the last few years where there's been a lot of contraction. How many of those farms could have survived without varieties like Simcoe? I'm not going to say it's all Simcoe, but
Simcoe, Citra, Mosaic.
Yeah, what Simcoe represents and what that did for those farms, the economic value that brought back, and how much did that layer in protection for us all in terms of being able to weather difficult times. So yeah, that's why I go back to it's one of the more sustainable hops we've ever grown for our farm. It's why we're still here and why we're who we are right now.
And in those 25 years, we now live in a world where brewers will call out the exact farm that these hops came from. I was in Paris this summer at Fauve in the 11th arrondissement, and even in Paris, France, you have a brewery making beers calling out the individual hop farms in the Pacific Northwest that these hops came from. And I kept thinking, does a single consumer care about that origin? But it doesn't really matter because the brewers do. And the brewers and the growers together are sharing, these relationships, making those connections and making it matter to consumers. Not because, again, it's going to sell more beer. Consumers may or may not really care that much, but they care because they care about where those ingredients come from, and it matters to make that connection. And that is exactly why we're here on the Perrault farm, walking through the hop vines as the wind whips through us, talking about Simcoe. Vinnie, thanks for proposing this episode. Jason, thanks for entertaining all of us with this kind of history. It's been wonderful to walk down memory lane, connect back with that history of Simcoe on its 25th birthday. And cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Here's
Honor to be
Simcoe.
involved. Thank
Cheers.
you. Cheers.
Cheers.
G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. Berkeley Yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary. Whether trending flavor additions or nostalgic favorites, the next best thing is around the corner at Old Orchard. Release your creativity with the magic of pure, uncut Oregon hops from Indy. Extra Tough has been making rugged and reliable boots for 75 years. Reach out to Canoe Wild Rice and try brewing with their unique roasted grain. Sample Prairie's lineup at the Roadhouse and Melvin booth at GABF this October. And try new Heritage Gold and Lighthouse Munich malts from Breeze. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to the beerandbrewing.com website. Click on the subscribe button. We are far more than just a podcast. Of course, if you are a subscriber, you can have access to a recipe that Vinnie Cilurzo has shared with us only for subscribers for their beer Simcoe 25, a homebrew scaled recipe, so you can see just how interesting and in-depth the use of Simcoe is there. But of course, that's only for subscribers. We depend on your subscription support to bring these conversations to you. If we were just a podcast, this wouldn't work, this business wouldn't work, and we would not be able to bring you the kind of depth that we do across every channel, from print to podcast audio to video classes to live events and everything else that we do. We depend on your subscriptions to support all of that. So go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and show us that what we do matters to you. We'll be back next week with another episode, of course, recorded on location out there in the Pacific Northwest. Lots more good stuff coming. In the meantime, cheers. This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.